Bo, thank you. So I want to welcome everybody to Operation Entrepreneur. This is Business Impacts Northwest celebration of military connected business owners during National Small Business Veteran Week. And this year, our theme is Together We Rise, Veteran Entrepreneurs Leading the Way. So we have 4 panelists here who are going to be talking about their experiences, and we'll get to know them in a little bit. First, I want you all to be aware that we are recording the presentation, and it's going to be provided to everybody who has registered for the event. If you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We love our questions. Before hearing from Administrator Guzman, I want to introduce myself. I'm Melissa Welsh, a business advisor and trainer with the Alaska VBOC, which provides business coaching and training for military connected business owners in Alaska. I'm a white female with medium brown hair and wearing purple glasses and a tan long sleeve sweatshirt. I'm in front of a red, white, and blue background, and my pronouns are she, her. We are funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the SBA to provide our services. So let's start this webinar with a short video from SBA Administrator Isabel Guzman.
2024 marks the 11th National Veteran Small Business Week, SBA's celebration of our nation's veteran and military family entrepreneurs and their contributions to our national and economic security. Whether they are creating local businesses in their hometowns or delivering the products and services needed to help ensure we have the strongest military, they are vital to our economy. Veterans employ over 5 million Americans and generate $1.3 trillion in total sales each year from their businesses. No matter where in the world, in what era or branch they served, members of the military community have one thing in common. They are trained for entrepreneurial leadership. They are hardworking, agile and resourceful, team-oriented, and committed to mission with unstoppable dedication. They do what it takes to get the job done. The SBA has supported the military community since our founding over 70 years ago, and we enhanced those efforts with the creation of the Office of Veterans Business Development 25 years ago. And over the years, we have continued to expand our offerings to ensure that the military community has a home at the SBA so that they don't have to go it alone. We've expanded the number of Veterans Business Outreach Centers from 22 to 31 in less than 2 years, helping more veterans access the business development resources, capital, and counseling they need to succeed. Last year, the SBA backed thousands of loans to veteran-owned businesses, totaling $1.2 billion. And under the Biden-Harris administration, their total loans are up 33% and total dollars are up 40%. And whether it's Boots to Business, a working capital loan, or our new Military Spouse Pathway to Business program, the SBA is committed to equipping our veterans and military community with the resources and support they need to succeed as business owners. And during National Veteran Small Business Week, we're calling on America to celebrate and take our veterans to the next level. Our resource partners are doubling down on trainings and outreach, and American consumers can double down on finding and supporting veteran and military family-owned businesses and their products. Veterans, we are grateful for your service and sacrifice and look forward to celebrating National Veteran Small Business Week in honor of all of you.
Thank you to Administrator Guzman.
2024 marks the
excuse me for those inspiring words. At this time, I'm going to introduce you to Beto Yarse, who's our Regional Administrator for Region 10, whose leadership continues to elevate and empower small businesses across our region.
Hello, everybody. Beto Yarse, Regional Administrator for Region 10 for the Small Business Administration, covering Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska. Happy National Veteran Small Business Week. This week is all about you. What you have done for our country while you were in our national uniform, and what you continue to do for our country by contributing mightily to our local and national economies. Thank you. Better entrepreneurship is thriving under the Biden-Harris administration. We know that the veterans are even more likely to start a business than someone with a graduate degree. You are also more likely to start a business than non-veteran. For this and many other reasons, the SBA has been marching alongside you, working hard to help you achieve the American dream of business ownership. The SBA is here to assist with what I call the 3 C's and the D: capital, consulting, contracting, and guidance to disaster assistance. We understand that small business face challenges, of course, but uniformed personnel, veterans, and their spouses face unique circumstances as well. President Biden recognized this as a sign and executive order to support military spouses and veterans entrepreneurs. The SBA now provides guidance and tailored resources to military spouses to help them to relocate their businesses and with their service members transfers to the new duty station. The SBA also launched a more effective and streamlined veteran business certification program that connects veterans to federal contracting opportunities. Veterans and their spouses are leveraging these and other initiatives to start and build their businesses. Your business are growing stronger. You are making a difference in our communities, and you are contributing significantly to local and national economies. Your contributions to the nation economy are as impressive as your contributions to the national defense. Veterans own nearly 2 million businesses that generating more than 1.3 trillion in annual sales. Those businesses employs about 5 million of our friends and neighbors and pump an annual payroll of nearly 200 billion into our communities. Our family of veteran business outreach centers has grown to 28, included the one opened in Alaska just last year. The military spouse pathway to business is working closely with spouses on their entrepreneurship journey, and this is on top of the popular Boots to the Business program, which can be found on U.S. military installation through the world. As a regional administrator for the beautiful Pacific Northwest, I'm trying to see how many veterans complete their military services in our area to return after they serve to grow their business here. So many of you are flourishing, and they are meeting the needs of even more customers. That's seen in a lot of numbers. About 70 million of 7A and 504 loans were awarded to more than 130 veteran-owned businesses in fiscal year 2023. And early indicators of the fiscal year 2024 numbers will be equally impressive. Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you to Beto Yarse for that video introduction. Up next, I want to introduce you to our VBOCs here at Business Impact Northwest. So here we have our Northwest VBOC team with Chris Armstrong Goings as the director there. And we also have our local Alaska VBOC team, and we are all here to assist you in your entrepreneurial journeys. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time at businessimpactnw.org. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And during this break, we'll be able to get our panelists on screen and up and running so that we can have a conversation about their entrepreneurial experiences, and they can answer some questions for everybody. Fake countdown.
Yeah, there we go.
Welcome back, everybody. We are going to get started by introducing our panelists here, our 4 panelists. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see our panelists fully. Okay, so let's get started with Christine Hopkins, and she's going to give us an introduction about who she is and what she does.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Christine Hopkins, and I'm with ASCII Federal Services, and Advanced Supply Chain International is what ASCII stands for. I am a military spouse and the CEO and majority owner of this organization. And what we do is we help small and mid-sized businesses and the federal government manage their stuff, either when they don't have the internal expertise or the labor to do it themselves. I'm a white female with dark brown hair, wearing a black sweater. I have Alaska Mountains in the background with my company logo.
Awesome. Welcome, Christine. Thank you so much for being here. Chad, let's hear a little bit about you and your business next.
I am Chad Lomax, and together with my partner Jasmine, we started the Kumon Math and Reading Center in Fairbanks, Alaska. We aim to basically provide supplemental education resources to anyone really ages 3 to 100, focusing primarily again in math and reading comprehension and composition. And it is a franchised program. We're working with a franchisor. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Tell us about your military background.
I was in the Army from 2008 to 2012. Got out after a tour in Afghanistan. That was enough for me. And yeah, then went to school afterwards and got my degree in engineering and then master's in business. And then we started this.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're going to hear from Philip next. I know he was having some technical difficulties with his camera, but we should be able to hear him.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So my name is Philip Vu, and my business is definitely not in IT because it's kicking my butt this morning. So I'm based out of Seattle. The businesses I represent are three fairly new and small ones. It's jbnjerky.com. We make on-demand fresher jerky with different flavors than what you can get at the store. It takes a little longer, but it's a lot fresher and better tasting from what we hear from our customers. I started that in 2023, and then February 2024, we acquired a small hot toddy company out of Tillamook, Oregon called trailtoddy.com. So we've been spending the last year just manufacturing and selling to customers directly online, but we just finalized an agreement with a local convenience store up here in Shoreline that we're going to close in about a month. So we'll be able to expand our production space and then have our own storefront to sell from, so we can get data to spin off and hopefully land some other locations. So those are the three businesses. My background, I'm a combat engineer. Did a tour in active from 94 to 98. Had too much fun, decided to become a civilian, worked my way up through supply chain as well in the civilian side up until 2021. And then the Washington National Guard said they needed combat engineers. So I re-enlisted, but then I got medically retired just recently because some issues. And so happy to be here and thank you for the opportunity. Oh, and I am in a blurred background, but I am wearing glasses. I'm an Asian male. I have no facial hair and a hat on right now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Philip. Last but not least, we have James here.
All right, let's see if I can remember everything here. So my name is James Marzalek. I'm the owner of Operation Red Dot. I'm wearing a black polo, white male, bald with a short beard. I'm a three-time entrepreneur. I was in the Army from 2005 to 2012 and immediately transferred over into entrepreneurship with my first business. It's a long story on how I got to here today, but ultimately the business that I'm currently in that's been live since 2016 is the only veteran-owned real estate brokerage and property management firm in Joint Base Lewis-McChord, working on supporting off-base military housing in the veteran community here when it comes to housing accessibility and affordability. That also leads into things like generational wealth and financial freedom, but that's another talk for another time. So I I think that's it. I think I hit it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, James. So thanks again to everybody for being here. I want to go ahead and get this Q&A started with a question that I hear that I have people ask me all the time, you know, when I work with them is, what's the biggest challenges you guys as entrepreneurs have faced in the early days of your business? And then how did you overcome those challenges?
Do you want to go in the order that we did the introductions?
You,
How can I do this?
I think, Christine, you wanted to go first because you seem like you're itching for it.
All right, well, I didn't say that, but I will go. For me, the biggest challenge, interestingly, was access to capital.
Mhm.
Has been the biggest challenge, and there's a variety of factors at play there. And ultimately, what ended up happening is I had to rely on short-term financing that was very expensive. And then I reached out directly to the SBA to find an alternative resource because my bank was not stepping in as they should have. So frustrating. And my recommendation to anybody dealing with that is don't wait until the last minute and count on somebody to step in. If you're not getting what you need, go talk to the SBA and find a different resource.
Absolutely. What do you think you might have done differently, you know, if you know, hindsight is 2020, right? You know, like what would you, you know, you said don't wait to the last minute. What would you have started with?
Yeah, honestly, my situation was a little bit different. And I think what I did was I trusted our current bank. So I took over the commercial business from a different group of people. And we went from multiple male owners to a single female owner. And we had never had problems with financing. So I didn't think it was going to be an issue.
Mhm.
And then it was. So 2020 hindsight, I would have shopped around rather than just trusting one bank.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss on their challenges?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think for me, as a combat vet, somebody who went, you know, into a combat zone that was using combat theory to do the job that we were trained to do in the Army, it was about understanding and articulating how to transfer those skills and knowledge over into the business world. I always like to say, you know, real estate's a lot like combat, except there's no bullets, at least if you're doing it right. But all the rest of the things still apply. And I think this applies to all industries. There's an area of operation, there's good guys and bad guys, there's a set amount of resources, and there's a mission. And if we think in combat terms and in combat theory, I think the hardest thing for me was wrapping my head around the totality, because business is a very multifaceted thing that has a complex matrix of factors that all connect in together. So it was not having a great idea and diving right into it. It was taking the time to do the military model of 90% preparation, 10% execution, and stepping back and understanding and ultimately building the plan, and then testing that plan behind the scenes before going live, to really make sure that I had a very tight understanding of all the factors. You wear every hat. I was the accountant, the janitor, the marketing manager, the HR hiring person, the orderer. You know, I was everybody, right? And when you're a solopreneur, that's how it all starts until you can start building up a team and you get traction and stuff like that. So, you know, being on my third business now, I think that's been the universal truth of the challenge of being an entrepreneur is every new business venture I go into, any new idea that I decide to put on the table and pursue, it really is mind mapping the totality of all those factors that connect in together, and just basically making sure I've got my crap together before we actually pull the trigger and do something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said. Did you, when you started, with any of your three businesses, did you do a business plan first, or were you with all three of them?
All three. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Do you think that was useful in doing that mapping and planning for you?
It forced me to think through the things that I may not have thought about otherwise. You know, there's ultimately, even with college, and I have a AAS in business, I honestly don't think that gave me as much value as just having a mentor or getting into the space and trying something and getting real life experience. Not that college isn't a good thing, but I think the academic side is very different from the operational side of entrepreneurship. And so there's some core things like how to run books is a pretty important thing that you should know. But at the end of the day, the business plan really does force you to think through not just what you were going to do, but how you were going to actually execute that. And then if you've built out the whole plan, you know, my average business plan ranged between like 35 and 55 pages, depending on the business. That's a lot of information to put down on the paper. But then I would actually build, you know, I would start building to-do lists and goal stacks and other things like that that tied into it. So I could take a very broad 10-year goal of building this business and actually chunk it down into what do I need to do today to move myself forward into that next direction. I think without the business plan, you're kind of shooting from the hip, and that may work if you're lucky. But in most cases, having a roadmap to success is really worth the time and effort you'll put in. It's just harder because I think everybody can relate to the fact that when you've got a really good idea and you have a concept of how you're going to execute that, you just want to go. You just want to get going. You want to start executing plans, and that is the natural thing to want to do. But I think fighting against that urge and actually taking the time to take some deep breaths, focus on the bigger picture, and actually build it out in a much more meaningful way that allows you to wake up every day and not really have to think about what you have to do. You just go do it because you've already built the plan, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have some insights there?
I'd actually like to kind of piggyback on what James was just talking about, because
Yeah.
from my experience, and I think what James is saying is correct. But uh, with everything, right, it depends on the individual. And so with myself, as I build out business plans, I find myself overanalyzing a lot of details, and I get stuck in building the plan and find myself getting to points of, okay, well, I think I've solved this. And now I realize why no one else is doing this, because this is why it's going to fail. And I stop myself on, you know, this business that we've started is my 10th attempt at wanting to create something, but the previous 9 doing the exact same thing that James is talking about. I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, this is why no one's doing it. This is why it hasn't happened yet. And maybe this isn't just going to work. Whereas with this time around, we developed a plan, because you definitely have to develop that plan. James is right. Don't shoot from the hip and just hope it all falls into place and works out. But we developed a very loose plan, because that business plan that you draft, 35 to 55 pages, is a living, breathing document, and it's going to change. And you're going to discover things, and you're going to need to make tweaks to the business plan. So don't get too caught up in having that be perfected and perfect before you move forward. You do just have to start executing some of the plan. And so as long as you have a good idea and there's a need in your market for your idea, start developing a bit of a plan, and then, but you got to start executing at the same time. And so that's just, again, different minds and different types of personalities. Like that was a inhibitor to me for a long time, was trying to have this perfect business plan before I started executing. And there was a balance for me.
Absolutely. So do you feel that, you know, you mentioned 10 different times, do you feel that doing things different this time is what made you go forward into the franchising arena? Or is there something else you did differently that made you feel like this was a more feasible option than the others?
You cut out in the middle of that question to
I'm
me.
so
I didn't
sorry.
quite get the whole question.
Yeah, Fairbanks, Alaska.
It's probably on my end.
Yeah. So is there, with this 10th time, is there something you did differently, that, you know, with the business planning that made you feel like you were ready to go into it versus in the past where you felt that that things were not as feasible?
To be honest, I think that the biggest key to the success this time around was having a partner that had a bit of a different outlook than I do. And so our personalities kind of meshed together. And while I was trying to overanalyze everything, I had her on the other side going, hey, no, this is ready. Like, let's do this part now. Let's execute this. Let's execute that. You don't need to keep researching this. You've already put X number of hours into that. You know the answer. Let's move forward. And so just having someone to kind of flatten the curve of some of my extreme parts was helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Philip, how about you? Do you have any significant challenges you wanted to share?
Yeah, it's kind of really I guess confident building to listen to Christine and James and Chad talk about what they went through, because it's pretty consistent. I also had the capital challenge that Christine's talking about, but my situation is a little bit different. So I had that big break between active duty and the National Guard, and I spent 20 years working for multinationals. So it gave me a operational and logistics background, and more importantly, a W-2 income. And that really helped when it came to applying for loans. And so I want to bring that out. It's a little like Chad said, it's different for everybody, different flavors. It just depends on your timing and your strengths and weaknesses. But I do agree with him in that having a strong partner is important. Like all my ventures, the jerky business, I came up with the idea after going through a session with Chris up here in JBLM. But then as soon as that was done and somebody in class said, hey, dude, I would pay for this jerky. And I reached out to like two veteran friends, actually three veteran friends, and a high school friend, and said, "Hey, man, I want to do this thing. It's yeah, I'm not like, the person that wants to lift 500 pounds. You want to do it with me?" And the funny thing was, my high school friend said, "Yeah, man, I'm opening up a Laotian restaurant in White Center. You can use the kitchen. I'm in." So you gotta leverage your network. It's entrepreneurship doesn't mean it's a solopreneurship sometimes. Sometimes you can get by with just using your network and then leveraging the passion. Um, but the plan is really important because like everyone said, it kind of gives you a direction, and it keeps you honest, because you do get really distracted as a entrepreneur, like, especially if you have like the OCD stuff like me. I go squirrel there every day, hey, new product, new strategy, new thing, and it gets distracting, and your plan gets you back to the baseline. But I do agree that it is a dynamic thing, because as soon as it's like any exercise that we do in the military, as soon as you hit contact, it falls apart and you start needing to be dynamic, and having that baseline to rely on is good, but you still need to flex with the situation to be successful. So yeah, and an example of that is I started the jerky business. The sales wasn't great, but we were gaining traction with the customer. So then I said, hey, what can we do? And I found a business on loopnet.com that complemented the portfolio. They were also online, made great revenue, and they had a big customer book. So we, X percentage of growth through the acquisition, because the opportunity was there. And then after a year of doing this, we were like, hey, man, if we can find a convenience store that pays for itself, then we can leverage that to produce in the location and sell in the location. So, we learned by doing, but we still relied on the plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is fantastic insight. Thank you. So another question for you guys. Would you guys be willing to share a major failure that you've experienced, and how you bounced back from that failure?
Sure, I'll go. We were unable to secure financing in the beginning of this. I thought that I had a good credit score, I had a good W-2 income, and I had a little bit of personal assets in my house and things like that. And and we weren't seeking a whole lot of money at first. We were kind of talking, and I think we were going to try to achieve getting $100,000 in financing, which isn't a small amount of money, but in terms of business financing, it's not a huge chunk of change. And I thought it would be very easy, but our business is not capital heavy, right? And so we weren't buying a building, we weren't buying assets. We're going to get some desks and stools, but those aren't worth anything on a balance sheet. And so no one was really interested in financing. We were basically looking for working capital, and that was it. And because we were forming as a LLC and taxed as an S corp, we had to pay ourselves through the business. It's a requirement as an S corp, and so a chunk of the financing that we were looking at was to pay two principal owners wages, and banks were not interested in that. And so that almost stopped the whole plan dead in its tracks, because I didn't want to be able to, I couldn't quit my job, or at least I felt like I couldn't quit my job and jump into this. We weren't sure how it would be received. We weren't sure. We had our plans and our projections from the business plan of when we'd break even, and we were projecting, 18 months. And so it was, okay, 18 months of no real income. How are we going to make that work? And obviously we weren't going to be able to make that work. And so we had to revise the business plan. We had to revise projections and figure out, okay, how can we do this on a shoestring budget? We have X number of dollars in our own bank accounts. If we're going to self-finance this thing, this looks completely different. And so we were able to press forward, and it required a whole different approach to how we were going to build up and how we were going to staff and how we were going to run the first 10 months of the business. And so we ended up having to self-finance. So that was a big challenge that almost ended the venture before it even started. But that's how we overcame it, is that we redid our projections, we redid our plan, and moved forward from there.
Got a little creative with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
I'll go. I would say the biggest mistakes that I've ever made and the largest challenges that I've had to overcome have hit me when I'm trying to scale into building a team, even at smaller levels, when it comes to like hiring, the first, let's say 5 to 10 employees in the company. Over hiring in the beginning before the revenue justifies it, in preparation for the momentum that you see coming, has been a mistake for me. And the number one lesson I think all entrepreneurs learn pretty early when they start hiring is labor and employees are the most expensive asset within any business ever. And that gets really expensive real quick. And so without actually having done the math to justify the amount of people that I was bringing on, I did it too soon. Not that I shouldn't have done it at all. I just did it too soon. And that killed a lot of revenue. It killed a lot of the financial momentum that we had growing. And there should have been a tighter analysis and a tighter timeline for when people should have been hired on. That's and then how to recover from it is I had to adapt ultimately. I had to let a couple of people go because once I looked at the books 3 months after I made all these hires, I'm like, we're at a loss. And at the end of the day, not having a company is a lot worse than letting a couple of people go because of a mistake that was made. And I obviously, I'm accountable for my actions. And so I sat those people down and explained what happened and told them once we reset and had the proper growth and momentum to justify it, and I showed them the math, I said they have a job here. But I had to let them go, temporarily, off of payroll. And they were obviously very sad, but understood. And of course, that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is go to somebody who relied on me for income and tell them that I made a mistake. That means they can't have that income anymore. That's a tough spot to be. You don't make that lesson more than once, I would say.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And do you have any advice on, when you're in that area where you need that help, but maybe financially your business isn't ready to take on that other employee, what's some advice you would give there?
Well, I think there's only two ways to do it. It's either do it yourself, which is how most solopreneurs are going to do it. They're going to sacrifice. And that's what entrepreneurship ultimately becomes, is a sacrifice to live a way that nobody will in the short term to later on live in a way that nobody else can, right? That's the way that I've always seen it. You can always go get financing, but it's like getting a loan for the car that you want to drive. You can pay cash for it, save up and pay cash and not have a loan behind it, or you can put minimal down and pay amortized debt over time, which makes that $40,000 car end up being $75,000 at the end of the day. So you can leverage through forced scale by getting SBA money, which is sometimes a very good option, or getting partnerships or, investment. There's a lot of other ways that you can finance that kind of thing. But in the beginning, I always tend to index towards organic growth. So let the flywheel of the machine dictate when you're bringing on more people. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can understand who needs to be hired in what role if you're not feeling the pain of what needs to be filled. So every time that I'm like, wow, this one thing is taking up 70% of my time when I'm being pulled away from strategy and other things that I, as the owner or CEO, should be doing, I'm going to know exactly what that role entails. And it's very easy for me to build the job description and go research what the pay structure should be and all that kind of different stuff. And I can look at the numbers and say, well, based on the actual realized revenue of the company, I can be justified in hiring this person. I think a lot of people, and me too, in the beginning, tend to say, well, I see the business in its state 5 years from now and what we're going to be doing. I should build the infrastructure for that now so I can handle the load in the future. And I think that's generally a pretty grave mistake. If we're making decisions based on things we don't actually have in hand, we're dealing ultimately with a sense of the fog of war, which happens in business a lot, where we just don't have full sight on something that's in the future. And because of just like combat, just like the highly changing environment that we deal with, things can pivot in a day, a week, a month, a year. It can change so fast and so often that if we're projecting out too far, we end up tripping over the stumps that are in front of us on the trail.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And Christine, I think you were going to share something too. And
So
yeah.
mine actually kind of sits between those two. When I took over the business, I was originally hired as a succession plan for the commercial company. And I took over the business as a minority owner in August of 2019. All of our revenue at that point was in oil and gas, all of it. Well, March 2020 came around, and I made a pretty risky decision to work with the current owners and take us through a partial liquidation because we anticipated losing 90 to 95% of our revenue, which happened. Took the business through a partial liquidation, downsized, and made actually the opposite decision of James. And I kept the core overhead team because I needed them to grow and scale back to what we were. So we went from $20 million a year to $1 million, with one billable employee left out of 200. At our smallest. And in that process, we restructured as a woman-owned small business. We got SBA certified as a woman-owned small business, and we started pursuing federal contracts. So we took one of the operating subsidiaries, pulled it out, made it a wholly owned company, and started running both a commercial and a federal services line. And it was tough because, similar to what Chad said, banks don't want to finance funding a loss, right? We had gotten 2 rounds of PPP loans to help carry us through. We had an existing line of credit, thank goodness, that we maxed out standing up. We did win a first federal contract as a prime, maxed that line of credit out, standing it up. So luckily I had saved that, not tapped into it. It was a matter, we knew we could turn it around. I used to tell people we were a 20-year-old startup. Um, so I knew we could turn it around. It was just, could I turn it around before we ran out of money? And the stress of these people depended on us for jobs. It's the middle of COVID. I'm putting like maxed out my 401k loans, took loans on life insurance, borrowed money from family, all of the life savings in the company. Of course, my husband was quite nervous over all those decisions. But luckily, we won our first contract, federal contract, and it stabilized the company. And then we just won our second one in April of this year. And this is the first year since 2020 that we've been profitable. So definitely some mistakes and lessons learned along the way, things I probably would have done a little bit differently. It all worked out in the end, but it could have very easily not have worked out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one takeaway from that, if you went back, like what would be the one thing you'd be like, I definitely would have done that differently?
I think sitting down and penciling out the math sooner than I did. And then again, if I had known at the beginning, 2020 hindsight, what I know now, I would have pursued SBA funding or some of these other options much sooner, so that there was less stress throughout the process. I definitely have to give it to my team. For 2 years, every week they saw what they called the graph of death, which said we're running out of money within 3 months. For 2 years, they saw that every week. And they stuck with me. So there's that.
That is an amazing team to have. Thank you. Philip, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I think one of the main takeaways for me, if I had to do it over, is the way I treated competition, and just kept trying to push things by myself. It was kind of ironic because I was starting up a partnership, but I was still doing a lot of the brain trust myself, and not reaching out to my peers in the network, and resources like the VBox and stuff like that to ask questions, because there's a lot of experience through these networks and these groups, and you're like, if you're not asking for help or just bouncing ideas off of them, that's a lot of pain avoidance that you could have benefited from. And that would be the takeaway, like you could ask somebody, what's the difference between starting up your own business and purchasing a business? That could have been the easy way to go into business, but I spent a year and a half pushing my own online jerky business. I benefited a lot from it. There was so much learning and talking with Chris and everybody. But then at the same time, I could have pivoted earlier and done that instead of, the order that I went to. So it's just eyeing the prize, but lifting your head up so that, like James said, don't hit the stump that's 2 inches in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me jump into asking you a little bit about networking. So that seems to be a theme in your entrepreneurial journey, and it's fantastic. So how important has that been, and what strategies do you recommend for building those connections?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like networking and relationships has been a big part of my journey, because it really allows you to leverage everybody's strengths instead of lifting that big heavy lift by yourself. The strategy, oddly enough, I one of the things I took away from the military is that brotherhood and that bond, that you're just putting as much in as you can for everybody to get by, and that kind of carried through to my civilian side. And so I treat everybody pretty authentically. A lot of people treat uh, businesses and anything that has to do with money, it's a little bit different, right? Because you got to pay the bills, you got to feed your family. But for me, it's like, hey, you know what? If they can't trust me without money, how are they going to trust me with money? Right. So it's been pretty easy, because like I pretty much tell them, how I feel. Maybe that's just something, my filter's not working, but like, it's allowed me to dabble in different industries without having to do all the research yourself. because one of the weaknesses about doing a lot of research, especially by yourself, is that you get tunnel vision, right? Sometimes you're like 2 a.m. in the morning, there's that echo chamber. I just got to push this across the line, man. And then you're stuck in that one output. But if you leverage your network, you reduce the research time, and then you get that different lens that's so valuable in business to stay dynamic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else have specific strategies you might recommend for building those connections?
Yeah, I think it's going to vary based on the kind of business you're starting. So for me, I was taking existing experience and starting a business in federal contracting, and which is a very expensive way to start. Don't recommend it. Start something on the commercial side and then move into federal. But from a federal contracting perspective, like you build those relationships by going to conferences, which is, I live in Alaska. They're not here. So, it's flying and hotels and all of the things associated with building those networks. Once you have the networks, then you can be a little bit more picky about what conferences you're going to go to, but you have to start. And one of the best pieces of advice I got early on was when you're going into federal contracting, you can either hire somebody that has the connections or you can build your own. It's equally as expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how fast you need to move. If you buy somebody with connections, which is basically what you're doing, when they leave, those connections leave with them. If you take the time to build the connections yourself, they stay with you. So that's the approach that I took, and definitely the approach I recommend, because then they're your connections.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Other thoughts on strategies for networking?
I'd just like to double tap on what I said earlier, and that's surround yourself with people who are where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such a something that's never let me down before. Even if it's competitors, I have competitors in my market that I know personally. I've gone to their events, I've talked with them. My mentality has never been competition is here to take me down. It's there's enough for all of us, unless there isn't. Like Christine said, it depends on the industry. There's a lot of nuance to that conversation, but at the end of the day, we could spend the rest of our life trying to gain the knowledge that exists in the world around us, and we will never even scratch the surface. So hyper focusing on the things that are the highest leverage connections, the highest leverage value to yourself or to your business or to your staff or to whatever that might be is going to be huge. But if I could give the advice of the highest leverage thing that's always been for me is building connections that are helping me be a better leader for the team and for the business and really focusing on that. So I'm not always going after the things that you might think. I'm going after people that I can physically see them exhibit skill sets that I want to improve in myself. And I'll go take them out to lunch or, I'll go to their events, I'll go hang out with them and I'll glean from them, whether it's through osmosis and just being in their space or specifically asking them questions. I go in with targeted approaches. I want to gain some value and give value wherever I can. And I think that mentality has kind of built its own network, so to speak, its own caliber of network that didn't exist before.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, earlier you mentioned, building a team of mentors and things like that too. Did you have a mentor? And if so, how did that relationship with them really impact your business?
Well, for the first two businesses, I most certainly did not have a mentor and would have killed for one. When I built the first two, I didn't really have any veteran-specific resources around me, didn't really have any business-related resources. I had investors for the first business. I did have an SBA loan for the first business. So I had some people around me that were kind of helping me put all of that together. But I don't know that I could classify them as mentors. Not somebody who is really challenging me to think about the bigger picture. And, for my first business, really asking like, have you actually defined your mission here? Like, what are you actively trying to accomplish? And what are the core values that you want the business to represent and translate into your customers? There was a lot of that really fine-tuned detail that's really important infrastructure that I was not really pushed to understand. And because I had never done this before, I didn't really have eyes on a lot of the important background infrastructural things that were really critical for the success of the long term. And I think obviously I regret that. I wish I would have been aware, but this was a I don't know what I don't know type of a deal. And that's the word. I hate that place more than anything in the world. There's really only two ways to offset what you don't know, and that's either by learning from other people, so podcasts, books, YouTube videos, meeting people, networking, stuff like that, learning from other people and what they've done or what mistakes they've made. Or the only other way is by putting both feet in the water, not dipping your toe in, both feet in the water, with the understanding that you're risking failure, and you may learn quickly from that, which is absolutely not a bad thing. But those are two very different approaches, obviously. And so when it comes to the mentorship, I would much rather learn from somebody else who's already learned that lesson and has that information and can help me understand contextually what it means for the path that I'm on with whatever business that I was touching at that time. So now in the third business back in 2015, 16, I did connect with a handful of people that were very successful in the industry and really started watching and analyzing and picking apart my competition and other people that were in the industry to see, wow, these guys are getting 2,500 hits on this post every single time that they post something. Why? What is it that they're doing that's making them successful? Or in the government contract space, it's wow, these guys seem to be absolutely murdering the scene with contracts and getting all kinds of connections, and their revenue has to be through the roof. What's going on with these guys? And I think taking a curiosity approach over everything is the right answer, and just trying to figure out how things work. If you have a mentor, that's a little bit easier because those people have a little bit more, they have more range on the scope. They can see a little bit farther because they've been there already. But I think just approaching it with curiosity, with or without a mentor, is really going to help you accelerate in a lot of ways. So I would, finding one solid person, and that's, I was in SBA SCORE as well. So I was in that program where they issued a mentor, and that person was very helpful in a lot of different ways as well. So there are the resources out there, and I think the resources may have existed. I'm sure they did. I just was not aware of them. And even when I was talking to people who knew about veteran entrepreneurship and stuff like that, these conversations never came up. Which didn't really do me any good. So, it's now understanding that these resources exist begs the question, what is the sliding scale and scope of those resources that I could potentially tap into? And once you kind of map that out in your head, you can understand, well, this would be very relevant for me. I'm going to go pursue that. Or, that's not as important to me. I'm not going to waste my time on that. And so it's about picking and choosing the highest leverage mentorship and people to be in your circle. But I think it really is a focus on, I have an inner circle of about 3 to 4 that are really, really rock star, absolute, just killers. They're the best of the best. They're very intelligent. They have the ability to bounce back ideas back and forth. We engage in legitimate debate where we'll take the opposite side of the approach just because we can. And it becomes this sharpening tool, the same way you would sharpen a knife. Your network is going to act in the same way. So if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have spent more time just being curious about what kind of resources are out there and what kind of mentor would be right to help me with the next stage of what I'm trying to pursue.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you mentioned SCORE. So if anybody is not familiar, score.org is an organization where you can be partnered with a mentor, either online or in person, to help you in your business and industry. Thank you. Chad, I want to ask you too about mentorship. Being in the, in the franchise world, do they provide you with mentorship, or how do you seek out somebody, to help in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly one of the best reasons, in my opinion, to go with a franchise approach. is that not only do they already have a model and kind of have figured out the secret sauce of their industry and what makes them successful, we're partnered. I've got an entire leadership team part of the franchise that like I can rely on for support. I've got resources. They've already built, the models and the templates and the marketing material, and they've researched what works and what is successful and what isn't successful, and really developed that model. And then we have our regular, every 2 week or every month meetings with our field consultant, who is essentially that mentor that just says, hey, how are things going? What's been successful? What's not? Oh, that's not successful. Oh, try it this way, because in fact, if you go into this section of our intranet, there's a resource for that. You don't need to figure that out on your own. We've already got that for you. Um, yeah, it's probably the most extreme form of mentorship, being with a franchise. And, they get.
You cut out a little bit there.
Uh,
If you can repeat, if you could repeat
Can you hear
that
me?
after, yeah, you mentioned it's the most extreme form of mentorship, and then you kind of cut out.
Yeah, so it's kind of the most extreme form of mentorship, and there are times where it's like, man, I wish the franchise didn't control this aspect, because our market is a little bit different and we'd like to do this different, but they say these are their parameters and we have to do it this way. And but again, if you're gonna go with a franchise approach, you need to recognize that they have done the research, and you are taking on a partner that has some say in the way you're going to run your business. And so it is entrepreneurship, but it is a partnership. And so you don't get to just do everything the way you want to, because if you wanted to do that, you wouldn't need a franchise. So um, there's some trade-offs and there's some balance there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on mentors, where to find them, how they have impacted your business?
So I realized I didn't even talk about a strategy when you asked me. So my strategy has always been to advertise, and I'm not talking about, bullhorn, but just to let people know when I talk with them, what my passion is. And I'm like, hey man, we make this jerky and stuff like that, and that way it starts the discussion and people kind of understand where you're coming from. Because if you don't say anything, they're not going to be able to align with you. And hey, I do have that experience. Let's talk about it. Or, no, don't do that. That's horrible. And then, you have different discussions. So that's for me, that's the best strategy. And how it's worked out is like my personal real estate agent, I asked her, I was like, hey, I need to buy this property. Does it look good? Give me your info, or your input. And then like 2 days later, she's like, sorry, it took so long, but it's commercial. I don't want to lead you down the wrong path, but I have a trusted person, and he ended up being my commercial agent, and I loved working with him, and I would have never met him on the internet or anything like that. And then he introduced me to his trusted lenders. So all of a sudden, in one or two questions, I ended up with this magnitude of like resources and expertise that I had no inkling that was around me that was willing to help me. So definitely let people know what you're doing and what interests you, and you'd be surprised what comes back your way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Philip. I just want to give the audience a reminder real quick before we continue that now is a good time, we can use the Q&A, whatever you need to ask some questions during this discussion, if you have any questions that you want to make sure are asked, just drop them in there and we can do that as well. So next up, I want to ask you guys a little bit about marketing strategies too. So with marketing strategies, what strategies worked best for you guys in the beginning, and how has that changed and evolved over time with your business?
That's such a good question. I think this, like any other question, is going to be dependent on industry, because how you market is going to be so wildly different to where your demographic lives, and whether you're doing a B2C or B2B, right? Whether you're going after consumers or other businesses. But what I'll say, no matter what, is we have access to more data today than ever before. And the ability to see who is in your space, what people are searching for, what platforms have the most weight for different things, and then being able to build your plan around that, I think, is really important. And this is really where due diligence into, I mean, this is part of the business plan, is marketing is a whole section for that, that talks about who is our demographic and psychographic. Who are we actually trying to pursue here, and where do they exist? What do they care about? What are their pain points and pleasure points, and all that kind of different stuff. But what I'll say is, the evolution of utilizing that data through different tools as we've grown. And just like the employee thing we were talking about earlier with the cost of labor, I think different marketing tools come at different times. Like, I would not start out today with the tools that I have deployed right now back in 2016 to 19. That would not have made sense, because some of these tools that create $1 million businesses cost a lot of money. Tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases over $100,000 in like an annual contract to use some of these tools. But the power that they give you when leveraged correctly, and the ability to build your funnel so massively is huge. But there's a time and a place for those things. So I think when it comes to marketing strategy, again, I have to take 10 very large steps backwards before we go launch Facebook ads and LinkedIn ads and Google ads and SEO optimization on the website and all these kind of different things that you should be doing and can be doing to drive traffic to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a podcast or government contracting or selling pet rocks or whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. You really, really deeply need to understand your customer, whoever that is, before you even consider, I'm going to apply money towards impressions and ad and clicks and other things like that. So it's, I think, more philosophically when I think about marketing, because the tool that you're going to use is going to be largely dependent on the demographic you're going after. I think about government contracting, which I've spent years in that space, just understanding it and pursuing relationships and contracts and stuff like that. My marketing efforts in that space could not be any different than my marketing efforts towards people who are trying to build real estate portfolios and military service members who are PCSing and need to rent out their home or sell their home, stuff like that. So, I've explored almost every different marketing strategy you can imagine, from targeted postcard campaigns to LinkedIn pushes, to Google ads, to Facebook ads, to events, hosting events and bringing people together, to billboards, to wrapped vehicles, to, I mean, the list goes on. I've tried it all, and some have been winners and some have not. The only thing that I think I would leave everybody with is be hyper cautious of companies that are messaging you cold, saying, hey, I can get you more attention. I can get you more impressions. Let's get you in front of people, because those companies and those contractors are a dime a dozen, and they all do the same thing. I spent a lot of money in the beginning getting sucked up into that rotation of, oh, well, I need more people looking at me. And so they're, they only want $1,200, for a 3-month contract. Okay, let's see what they can do. Never have I ever gotten a good rate of return on those types of conversations. And you're going to get, I mean, my email box even today is blown up. I get, 3 or 4 of these, we can rebuild your website. We can get you impressions. We can do ads for you. I get these all the time. And I don't know at that lower level where they're messaging me cold that it's ever been worth it. Now we mess around with people like Neil Patel and that higher level. Truly, they have proof of concept. They can show me how they've turned small businesses into big businesses. They can tangibly show me data that is reliable and trustworthy, where these other guys can say, well, look at the 100,000 impressions I got this company. Well, impressions don't mean anything at all at the end of the day. That doesn't help me do anything, and I just wasted a lot of my money. So it's being very cautious of, I don't want to say charlatans, but I'm going to say charlatans. People who talk a big game and they have really fancy marketing, but can't back their product up in the background. I've learned from enough marketing companies that you just have to be very cautious about the tools that you're using and making sure they're aligned with your mission, but then also, again, taking some very large step backwards and deeply, deeply understanding who your demographic and psychographic base is.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And if anybody in the audience is wondering, you'll see a lot of those, as James calls them, charlatans, come into your DMs on Instagram and even LinkedIn nowadays. They're everywhere. So those are the ones you're referring to, right?
All the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Never
Okay.
end.
You mentioned a little bit about, being in the different sectors as well. So, and including government contracting. So Christine, I'd love to hear a little bit about, any marketing tactics you use in that arena as well.
Yeah, so what we do is service-based. And so it takes a lot longer for us to win a contract. Even on the commercial side, it can take from 2 to 10 years to win a contract on the commercial side. On the federal side, it's 2 to 3 years of prep for an RFP, or request for proposal. And so our marketing is really around demonstrating that we are subject matter experts in our niche. What we do is logistics and supply chain. And so our marketing on the federal side, our customers are on LinkedIn. So that we do a lot of media content on LinkedIn and Facebook around education. What is a supply chain? How does this work? What's the importance of doing annual cycle counts? What is the importance of validating your international supply chain and being prepared for shipping issues in the Middle East to impact, your deliveries here in the US. So it's really education is where we focus our marketing. And that's, like I said, LinkedIn, Facebook are the two primary, and then we have a running blog on our website. So our strategy getting to that SEO optimization is all of our content is written on our website, and then we link to it on social media. So it drives traffic back to our website.
Fantastic. And Chad, being in the franchise arena, I'm sure that there are specific things that you have to take into account when marketing, right?
Yeah, right. So we can't do certain types of marketing without permission, because there's a national brand to protect, and so we can't just start slapping logos on whatever we want. We can't just advertise however we want. We got to get things approved through branding, and so that limits a little bit. Also, just the very different nature in these businesses, right? What James does, what Christine does, and what Philip does, and what I do. Jasmine and I do, is just wildly different methods of advertising. So, for instance, we're in Fairbanks, Alaska here. Fairbanks, Alaska is a very word of mouth town, where, and still very centric on Facebook. Whereas nationally, Facebook might not be a method that, pays dividends anymore. But in Fairbanks, if you don't advertise on Facebook, if you don't have a Facebook page, people treat that as your website here. And so we might have a website, we might have the best website ever, but if we don't have a solid Facebook page, we don't exist to a lot of people. And so just knowing your market and how you talk to that market is I think very important. We had a Halloween, we decided to turn that into a marketing event for our center, because we realized, hey, like, we're going to be at home, we're passing out candy, but our entire demographic is coming to our doorstep all night long. Why are we not branding this into our Kumon Math and Reading Center and making it a game and making it fun and passing out brochures and just spreading awareness? And, we signed up, 5 or 6 enrollments within the week after Halloween, just because we took that. And it wasn't a free event, but it was an event that cost no more in marketing expenses than I was going to spend personally in candy anyways. And so we were able to kind of steal that moment and turn it into good for ourselves. The biggest thing I would say is with any marketing, you have to actually pay attention to the data. You can't throw money into radio and go, well, I hope that worked. Oh, hey, we got a few new signups. We got a new contract. We got this. That must be from the radio we put out there. Who knows? Right? It could be coincidence. Maybe it did come from radio. Maybe it came from, a referral that just happened to coincide with the $5,000 radio drop you just did. You need to collect the data. Otherwise, all of it, whether it looks successful or not, is really just spinning your wheels. You don't know exactly what is paying those dividends to you. Because if you did, you could actually funnel more targeted advertising into the avenues that work versus the avenues that don't. If I say that Fairbanks is a Facebook town, we have to use Facebook. Well, if I throw a bunch of money on Facebook, I don't actually know if that's doing anything unless I'm asking people when they sign up, hey, how'd you hear about us? Hey, did someone talk to you? Oh, you saw our ad on Facebook. Okay, great. Good to know. Now I know that putting more money into Facebook, is worthwhile, and I can calculate my ROI on it. I spent the $10,000 on Facebook and I got X number of signups, and those pay $20,000 over the course of the life of the customer. Okay, that's a valuable method to advertise versus something that isn't. So you just have to collect the data. Every industry is going to be different. Every town's going to be different. Every business will be different. You have to collect the data, and that's the consistent through all of these businesses and industries. Is you have to know where that advertising is successful and not.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So I just want to say, as we're talking about, we're talking about the market research and marketing, for everybody who is here and listening, tomorrow on Thursday, the 14th, there will be a digital marketing webinar. So I'm just going to put that out there for Operation Entrepreneur event. So we have time for probably one more kind of question here, and this comes from our audience. And so they want to know if you can speak on the mindset it takes to deal with the no's of entrepreneurship.
So if I might jump in real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I sold cars for 5 years early on in my life. And that is the number one thing you had to learn as a car salesman, was how to take no and not let it affect your mindset. Because as soon as you got down in the dumps because you spent an hour or two with a customer and then they said no at the end of it, you'd take that energy into every other interaction that day, and you just be more likely to just get no after no after no after no. You had to learn to brush it off. And the easiest way, I think, to deal with that mindset is to just know you're gonna get no's. No's will come. And so if you can start looking at your closing ratios, how often you get told yes, you can build backwards from that. If I know that, 3 out of every 10 customers I talk to are going to just tell me flat out no, okay, that means 7 out of 10 say yes. If I need to get 20 yeses, how many customers do I need to talk to? How many people do I need to put myself in front of? And then that mindset just kind of starts to melt away. You're not really worried about the no. The no is just an obstacle to get to the next yes. And it's not personal. It's a no just generally means you haven't sold me enough value to what you're selling me yet. And you can learn from that. And okay, so the next person I talk to, I need to make sure that I highlight A, B, and C better because I didn't do, the proper job with this last customer. I just need to, I need to build the value, right? It just comes down to value of whatever it is that we are trying to exchange for money, needs to be higher to get more yeses, and you're gonna get no's, and you just need to move past it and keep putting yourself in front of people because you will get yeses.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Does anybody else want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit different because, again, we're going after long-term contracts versus the one-off sale. So the sales ratio on this type of business is much lower. So you get a lot of no's. And it really is about building relationships and using the no's to learn how to do it better next time. Typically on the federal government side, for sure, if they pick somebody else, you can go back and say why. and find out what it was that you could have done better to be competitive. First question is, was I competitive? Because the answer might be no. If you were competitive, where were you less competitive than who won? Usually it's going to come down to price, but not always. You know, you might not have had a great technical proposal, and that you'll never know if you don't ask. On the commercial side, we use our no's to continue to build relationships, right? Just because they said no doesn't mean we can't continue to reach out to them and continue to have conversations and continue to provide free bits of education here and there, and potentially turn that no into a yes down the road. Because on the commercial side, it might be a matter of timing. You know, we're working with small and mid-sized businesses. They might not be ready for a warehouse. They might not be ready to pay an external expert, but they love the information. You know, they, as small business owners, we all know free is fantastic. So just continuing to build that relationship so that when they do need you, you're top of mind.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
James or Philip, did you want to add anything on there and how you deal, what kind of mindset it takes to deal with those no's?
Definitely. So I think about this in two phases. Number one, there's over 8 billion people on this planet. There's a ridiculous amount of businesses, depending on what you're going after. It's audacious to think that everyone you speak to is going to be your customer demographic. It's audacious. You have to go in assuming that they're not the right person, and you're going to figure out if it fits. And I think that's the better approach is, again, curiosity. Is my service or product right for the person that I'm talking to? And being willing to tell them it's not, if it's not. I think that's a really big thing. And then the phase two would be feedback loops, feedback loops, feedback loops. I don't like getting just a no. I want an exit interview with every single person that says no. And to be honest, I want an exit interview with everybody who says yes too. Government, this is one of the things I love about government contracting when you're in it. When you submit a bid and a proposal, you don't just get a sorry you weren't selected. You can have a full-on debrief where they tell you why you didn't get it. And if you think that isn't the most valuable piece of information that you could ever get as a business owner, you're crazy. You want to know the why. The data tells a story. It could be price. It could be the presentation. It could be they're the wrong business size. As it said before, there's so many reasons why they might not be right, or they might not be right now. Those are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that businesses and consumers are at different levels and those fluctuate all the time, there's so many different factors here that really double down on the fact that if you're gaining that data, especially early on as a new business, that is ultimately what's helping you pivot. And the military preaches adapt, improvise, and overcome. So if you get 100 no's in a row and you don't know why, that is a failure. You want to understand why, because that's going to help you tune your product, tune your marketing, tune your presentation, tune your pitch, tune whatever it is that isn't working to get it to work. And you might go through the next 100 and get a no, but that 101 might be a yes. And you're going to learn from that person. Again, a yes is not just a great, they signed up and now I get money. You want to know why. Just as equally as you want to know why they said no. They're both equally as important. And so I think really focusing on the mindset of no's are out there everywhere you look, right? You can't be afraid of no's. But if you're not gaining anything other than just the no, I think you're leaving a lot of value on the table.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so we are just about out of time. So I want to say thank you, James, Christine, Chad, Philip. Thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing your expertise with our military connected business owner community. Thank you all who have attended the webcast today. And I want to leave you with a little piece of advice, and that is a lot of the theme of what we had here today is tap into all of the resources available to help you succeed in your entrepreneurial journey. at Business Impact Northwest, we not only have the VBOC to help with business coaching and classes and networking events, but we also have a capital readiness program that can provide you with technical assistance that can help you in accessing, the capital and financing you need for your business. And we heard a little bit today how that was a bit of a challenge for some of our entrepreneurs here. I also want to thank our sustaining partners, the SBA, the USDA, BCU, Harborstone Credit Union, Verity Credit Union, Sound Credit Union, and Washington State Employees Credit Union. We appreciate all of our sponsors and their support so that we're able to bring these events to you guys. So thank you all.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.